Okay, so you guys will already have this PDF in your inbox, in your email, but I wanted to make a quick little video walking through some things. Mainly the floor plan. It's a little easier than writing a long, confusing email, so we'll touch on a couple things, but anyway, let's just dive right in here. So these are some general notes that I took from our conversation. I won't spend too long on this, but there were some important ones to point out here. The debate between the bungalow or the two-story, trying to reconcile that with limiting the number of stairs, if you're thinking ahead 10 or 20 years, rough size, number of bedrooms, things like that. One of the things that really kind of popped out to me that seemed important was this mudroom, and the way you guys described that kind of as a threshold between the garage and the kitchen and the living room and everything, and putting the laundry in there. So that one kind of stuck out as a really important consideration. So you'll see that as we move ahead. And then, a big kitchen with an island for the kids, things like that. You guys mentioned having family dinner every night, so having a big dining room table for guests and things. Minor stuff like the brick, propane, things like that. Some vaulted ceilings here and there. And then one of the next things I did was look at the zoning. This sometimes is a little more important than other times. For you guys, it's not a big deal because the property's so big, we have tons of space to pretty much do whatever you want. So the setbacks are all fine. We'll be totally fine there. There's no maximum building height, so that's fine. Two things to note that are great. It's not located in the Niagara Escarpment Commission or the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority. You probably already know that, I assume, but that just makes things a lot easier for getting permits and stuff. That's a few less hoops to jump through. Okay. So as you know, I went to the site and walked around there for a little while, and Ray was kind enough to give me a survey as well, which really allowed me to draw the site plan up, pretty accurately. So this is, should be within a foot or two. So this is pretty accurate for your building site. Now this is roughly where you picked out where that stake is, where you want to build. So I was just kind of looking for the opportunities and challenges and stuff, and the obvious ones are the views. So that's the green little arrows there, and the best views are all sort of towards the back here, right? You have those rolling hills and that nice landscape, and it's not like there's bad views anywhere, really. It's pretty nice everywhere, but the longer views are towards the back. You do have some up at the front and whatnot as well, but then also looking at the sun path diagrams and the angles and things like that. So in the morning, the sun's going to be coming this way, a little bit lower to the horizon, but then as you move throughout the day, obviously this is north, so then you have the sun coming directly from the south, but it'll be coming at a much steeper angle, so you're not going to be getting that glaring light coming in the windows necessarily that you might get, over here later in the evening with sunsets and stuff like that. So that was the first thing I did, was really just looking at the site itself without any other sort of preconceived notions, sort of what areas have the best views, what's going to get the most sun, that simple stuff, and then looking at some basic forms that the floor plan could take to start to take advantage of that stuff. And I did a couple more than these too, but these are the ones that were sort of working. Ended up settling on kind of a hybrid between this one, and this one, I'd say. Maybe this one as well. They're all sort of meshed together, but then you're taking advantage of a lot of that sun on this sort of southwesterly, a little bit more on the west, and those views. So basically, if you're building here, the nicest parts of the house that you want to take advantage of the views and the sun are really going to be towards the back of the house. That's really what came from that little exercise. So moving ahead, taking those forms and stuff, and then adding the actual rooms and things that we're looking for. So this is a list I put together after talking with you guys, basically with everything you're looking for, and I put a rough number in terms of area for each of these rooms, and some of them there's a few, like the bedroom, obviously there's 3 of those for the kids, and then you total all those up, and you end up, we're definitely in the ballpark with what you're looking for here. There's a couple things like this grossing factor, so that takes into account the thickness of the walls, circulation space, that kind of stuff. And then these items here, I didn't give them any, I didn't assign them any area because they're really, most likely going to be in the basement, which it sounds like will be unfinished at this point. And then you can, in the future, you can put extra bedrooms or a rec room or, miscellaneous, whatever you need down there. But I'm assuming the mechanical room will be down there, and they can certainly be storage when it's unfinished as well. So the next step then, and I mean, there's some exterior stuff there too. But then the next step is looking at the relationships between those to see sort of what belongs together, what doesn't necessarily belong together, and starting to group that stuff. So if you look at the ones that are marked in green, that's more the public space. Like if you're having some clients come over for photography sessions, that kind of stuff. You don't want them obviously going into your master bedroom, walking through the living room, that kind of stuff. So these ones in green are a little bit more public facing, where people can come over. You walk in the entry, you use the studio, you can use the washroom, the front porch as well. But then beyond that, you don't really need access to the rest of the house. So that's kind of one little grouping. And then you have the semi-public space. And that's areas where if you're going to have guests over and things, family, yeah, they're going to be in the kitchen, the dining room, the living room, those kinds of places, the deck, the pool. So, I mean, they're mainly for you guys, but I mean, certainly you'll have guests over once in a while that are going to get some use out of those rooms. And then finally is the ones highlighted in red, which is really just the more private stuff, really for you guys as the homeowners and the occupants living there. So, I mean, the mudroom and laundry, you don't really want people walking through there, although there is probably a relationship between, the entry. That's sort of why they're grouped up together. But then obviously the bedrooms and washrooms, pantry, that's really for you guys, in the garage. So that's how I started to break it down and start to group things together. So you really have the three groups. There's kind of the public, the semi-public, and then the private. And then starting to juggle those and balance them. And another thing I looked at there was you talked about having some high ceilings. So these ones with the orange dots, just looking for opportunities in spaces that could be next to each other and take advantage of a slightly higher ceiling level. The entry, that's one that you mentioned. Your existing house, the entry is a little bit cramped. It's kind of tight when people walk in. So, I mean, if you had a higher ceiling, that would certainly alleviate some of that feeling. The studio, this one I think makes a lot of sense for sure. When I saw those photos and you have the giant soft boxes and you'll have lighting and the roll down backdrops and stuff like that. I mean, a higher ceiling in there probably makes sense for your equipment and lighting and that kind of stuff. Master bedroom, again, could just be kind of nice to have some more space in there, a little bit more volume. And then definitely places like the kitchen, dining room, living room, that never hurts to have high ceilings there. Front porch, I mean, it might not. But that was how I started to break things down and start to group things together. And then so moving to the next step then is really drawing those rooms out, at roughly the scale that I had given them, the number of square feet, and looking at those relationships a little bit closer, starting to group that stuff together. So I mean, you had the more public stuff at the front, you have the porch, the entry, the studio, a closet for when people come over. So that's sort of the one group. The kids' bedrooms and a washroom, that's one group for sure. Your master bedroom with a washroom and walk-in closet, that's certainly a group. That stuff all belongs together. And one thing that's interesting is this relationship here between these the bedrooms, between the kids' bedroom and your master bedroom, because they, on one hand, they are very similar. They could be all next to each other or stacked on top of each other, but they could also be at opposite ends of the house as well. So that's one thing that is kind of a big question at this point, is whether you want your bedroom right next to the kids or if you want a little bit of separation. We'll get into that a little bit more in the floor plan here in a second, but so that's kind of a group with two subgroups. And then you have the more utilitarian stuff like the garage, the mudroom, stairs, and then the more sort of living, everyday stuff, kitchen, dining, living, your back deck, that kind of stuff. And so you'll start to see what belongs together. The thickness of the line connecting things means they have a really strong relationship. That's kind of how I diagrammed this out. So things like the garage and the mudroom, there's a nice heavy line between those because, I mean, it makes sense to have them side by side, and there's a strong relationship between those. And then you start to sort of see what belongs next to each other, what doesn't, where there's room for circulation, things like that. So then we'll get into the fun stuff here. So this is the first crack at it. I've done a couple variations, but this is the one that was most promising. So I spent a little more time on this one, and I think it's hitting home pretty well. So this is what I wanted to spend a little more time just walking you through here. So I'll take a moment. I will say right off the bat, this is a little bit big. You were talking, about 2,000 square feet. This one's right now, as it's drawn, it's about 2,400 square feet. So it's a few hundred square feet over. At this point, I don't think that's a big deal. There's definitely some space that could be cut out and could be made a little bit more efficient. But I know you're getting anxious to see something, so I wanted to send this along. And we'll just walk through it here. So maybe I'll start sort of with the mudroom, because again, this is one area up here where you guys mentioned this a lot, and it sounded really important. And this is one area with the front entry and the mudroom and those relationships with the studio, where a lot of those more stock plans, I mean, they're not really going to account for the specific nature that you guys are looking for with the studio as a business and everything, and having guests and clients and stuff come over. But so this is one relationship that I wanted to really tackle. So this, I think, is working pretty well. So I mean, you have the big front entryway here with a nice big front porch, probably up a few steps most likely. This dash line that runs around the outside is where I'm assuming the overhang is. So I mean, this whole front porch would be covered more or less. And again, this is preliminary, so any of this stuff can change. So nothing here is set in stone by any means. So I mean, when people come in, you have a nice wide entry right off the bat. You have access to the garage, which is great for you guys. I mean, if you're coming home from work or whatever, you pull in the garage, you can go right here. The mudroom is right there. And now, one thing that makes this plan a little bit different, and that hopefully works well for you guys, is I've drawn in some pocket doors on both sides of this mudroom. So this takes up a little bit more space because you have circulation basically all the way around this area. But the advantage of this is you have the studio up at the front. So imagine a client comes over, they're getting some photographs done, they come in, they can set their bags down, maybe there's a little bench or something there. The studio's right there, they don't have to walk through the rest of the house. You can take this little sliding door and just shut that mudroom right off so they don't see it. And the same with the other side. So you're having Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner, there's tons of people over, you want to hide the laundry and the coats and stuff, you just shut that door there. And that mudroom completely disappears, but you still have access through the front door for guests and things. But there's plenty of room in here for laundry. I would assume this would be basically like a countertop running along there for folding clothes. You'd have shelves for detergent and soap and stuff like that above. And then this is like almost, it could be like bench seating with built-in cubbies, lots of drawers and storage and coat hooks and things like that. So you can have all kinds of stuff going on in there, but you can leave it open probably 90% of the time for when you guys are there. But then, when people are coming over, you literally just have to close those two doors. That room disappears. No one has to go through it. No one has to see what's inside. And also, if when guests come over, they still have access to a closet. They can hang up the jacket, whatever they have to do. Little powder room is right there. So I mean, if you're having someone come over for a photography session, they're really limited to this area right here, and they don't have to go any further. I mean, will they see into your house down this corridor? Yes, but I mean, they're not going to be walking through your kitchen or anything like that. So that's probably the most unique thing out of this plan. But I think given what we discussed, I think that works really well. Now, given that we're over an area a little bit, I mean, I could trim this down. This is about 5 feet wide. This one's about 4 feet wide. So this is a pretty substantial mudroom. So I mean, that could get trimmed down a little bit. In terms of the studio, I placed it up here for a few reasons. So I mean, we'll get into this in a second, but north would be roughly, this way. So that said, this could be slightly higher in terms of ceiling height, and then really you could have windows on 3 sides, so you can get east, north, and westerly light. So basically, at all times of day, you can be getting nice, natural, diffused light without any harsh stuff coming from the south. And again, it's close to the front of the house for when people are coming over. So that's why I situated that one up there. You can have tons of windows, and if it is a higher ceiling height, I mean, you could have just big front windows facing north, so it's diffused light all the time, and then maybe some high windows up on the sides, something like that. And also, I was imagining, after seeing that photo, if you imagine that studio in section, then if you were to slice it in half, and if it had a high ceiling, pardon me, I'm drawing with my mouse here, so it's not going to be the best drawing in the world, but if this right here was an exposed beam, so maybe you had a couple beams running across this thing here, that'd be a perfect place to hang up lights, things like the diffusers. You could have some electrical outlets up there as well, so you don't have cords running all over the place. So, maybe that's a nice peaked roof in there with the higher ceiling heights. You get those exposed beams, makes it really easy to hang equipment, and makes it a pretty flexible space. And then in the future, I mean, this would easily be convertible into another bedroom or an office or something like that. So you can kind of make whatever you want out of it. It's a nice flexible room. So then moving beyond there, I mean, 3-car garage, pretty self-explanatory. Graham, I know you mentioned having a business that you run, like a little side business that you run into your garage. So I don't know, maybe you need a little bit more space off the side or a workbench or something like that. But that's pretty easy to do. Circulation through the garage is working well because you can basically just pass right through there. You're not bumping into cars, stuff like that. I haven't, at this point, I haven't assumed there's anything above the garage space because you could have theoretically a big attic up there, and that'll come up as one of the questions I have for you guys later. Is, if you could, if you foresee the possibility of needing sort of a rec room or something like that, when the kids are older, they want a place to go hang out or something. You could you could build this garage in a way that you could have a room above there, and maybe it's not insulated or anything to start, but then the options there if you ever want it. Obviously, you'd need stairs to get up there, which would change a couple things, but at this point, it's basically just a 3-car garage with sort of an open attic space above it. So then, as you move through the house, I mean, you'd be parking your car, you'd come in here. You talked about taking off dirty work clothes, things like that. You're passing right through the mudroom, super easy. The kids then branch off this way, so then you have all the kids' bedrooms all next to each other. They're fairly basic, straightforward. Closets in each. I'm assuming you want to keep them all fairly the same in terms of size and things like that. The way I've drawn it now, this one on the end obviously is probably going to be a little bit nicer because you can have windows on 3 sides. This one can be on 2 sides, and this one just on the 1 side. But we can play with that too and make them all, exactly the same size if that's going to cause an issue with the kids or anything. And of course, they have their own washroom. A couple sinks in there to make it easier. Probably a linen closet near there for towels, things like that. This closet, I was thinking it could be more of a pantry for the kitchen. Maybe that's not necessary. The kitchen down here is a pretty good size. So, I mean, there's plenty of counter space all the way around the outside. I mean, that will also have to include, your fridge and stove, and whether you put the sink on the island or you could put it down here somewhere where it's right on a window facing outside. So there's plenty of counter space. Plus you have the giant island in the middle. Definitely seating for 4 there, no problem, so the kids can sit and come and go as they please. The dining room, I kind of like how this is working. So it's certainly big enough for a bigger table if you need. The one that's drawn right here is 8 feet by 3 feet. So it's certainly big enough for you guys for family dinner. But then you could definitely seat 10 to 12 people up there, no problem, if you need. And it's not really a defined room because you're kind of blurring the line a little bit here between the dining room and the kitchen. You're blurring the line a little bit, between the dining room and the living room. And it's kind of a nice central hub. I mean, it works well with the circulation because you have a couple main points, because you're going to have people walking through here, you'll have people walking through here, and then this is kind of a main one going this way as well. And then, I mean, you'll have people flowing around this and the island. So this kind of becomes a central spot for the house, for family dinner each night. You get views kind of everywhere, which is nice too. So it'll be nice and bright. And I envisioned, speaking of the high ceilings and stuff, like if, and grouping those together. So this, sort of consider this kind of a giant rectangle here. And now if this section here had higher ceilings, maybe this is the roof peak roughly in the middle, give or take. So the roof is sloping this way, and then you could have nice high ceilings throughout this whole area, which works well because then you walk in, you have nice high ceilings in the entry. You kind of have this pod of a mudroom, which maybe it doesn't go up to the ceiling then. Maybe it's you can sort of have light filtering over it and above it. But then you have nice high ceilings in the dining room, the kitchen, the living room. And then this here, you said you enjoyed the fireplace in your current living room. And considering we're doing gas and everything, I think it makes sense to, to have a fireplace. Totally up to you guys, but there's certainly room for it. And this one's kind of nice because then this would be, I'm envisioning a nice tall fireplace in the middle that's basically going right up to the peak. And then that works well structurally then too because it's kind of supporting the span. And then you have a nice living space down here. This is all sort of one group of stuff. Dining, kitchen, and living. So you can be, someone can be eating at the island, someone can be doing homework here, you can have someone watching TV, someone's cooking. Everyone has their own space, but you're all kind of interacting together. But that's a question, like maybe that's too open. Maybe you want to close this off a little bit more. Like this could be extended. This could be extended right down if you want, and this, you could even have a door or something there to really block those off, because it will be potentially loud. If someone's using a blender or if someone's watching a movie, you're definitely going to hear it throughout this whole space. So acoustics are definitely a consideration. Not only will you be able to see each other from the dining room to the living room, but certainly be able to hear each other as well. And then the stairs, this is one, I wasn't sure where to put these. So this goes down to the unfinished basement, which I'm assuming at some point in the future you'll finish. So that kind of becomes a question, is if, do you foresee it being unfinished for, more than 5 years or something? Because if that's the case, I probably wouldn't put that staircase as central. I was playing with it over here a little bit as well, where it's tucked away. It's not a central feature that people are going to see as much. But if you plan on finishing that basement in a few years, putting a rec room or something down there, then it probably does make sense to have it maybe a little more open where it is shown right here. And it can still be nice and bright here. This wall here, it could be a full height wall, but I've kind of envisioned that as a screen of some sort. Like if you imagine wooden slats that run, from the floor to the ceiling, or something like that, of that nature, you're going to have all kinds of light spilling in this way from the south and the southwest and the east. But then if this is kind of a perforated, slatted wall, and then this is just really a balustrade, a handrail, then, or a guard, I should say, then you'll have all that light filtering through there and then into the stairs and the stairwell, which is kind of nice, and it doesn't become a dark little stairwell. So, but that's a question, if you want that that stairwell open and exposed, or if you want it tucked away a little bit more, if it's not going to get used a ton. But that's easy enough to kind of shift around here and there. So living room is a pretty good size. You talked about having trouble organizing the furniture in your existing. This one makes pretty good sense because, you probably have a fireplace and a TV there. Everything's kind of directed around that. The opposite could be true. You could put the fireplace and TV on this wall as well. And then you still have seating here, here, and here, and everything is kind of facing outward instead. As it's shown now, everything's facing inward. If you could flip it and everyone would sort of be facing the windows. This is probably a little bit more flexible for seating and furniture layouts and things like that, because there's lots of wall space around that perimeter. And then of course, you probably want to sneak in a few patio doors. One in between the kitchen and the living is great, that goes out onto the deck. Probably another one up here. Again, thinking about the circulation and how you guys are going to use this, I wanted to, the mudroom was kind of this central hub where a lot of things, if you look back at the diagram, a lot of things connect to this, and I wanted to make it fairly easy to go from the front yard in through the front door you have your muddy boots on, you go through the mud room, and then you go right back out again, and you don't have to track through the whole house. So I mean, if that could be tile flooring or something a little more resilient. And the same goes for the garage. You can pop in right through the mudroom and out, and you're not having to traipse through the dining room or anything like that. So sort of limiting the distance between the front and the back of the house, and really just going through the mudroom for the most part. And that's working pretty well. And again, keeping that room close to that entrance, which could be up here too, actually. And then so this area over here, if you follow that dashed line again of the roof overhang, this becomes, I assume, you probably want a barbecue, some patio furniture and stuff that's going to be covered for, when it's raining, or if it's too sunny one day, you can have a nice covered area at the back. It's going to get lots of sun and everything, but yet it's still covered. The back deck, I might have gone a little overboard. This is, it's pretty big. You kind of have free reign for wherever you want to put the deck. It could even wrap right around too, which would be really nice, because then you'd have deck all the way around this living space. And you could potentially even put another door or something over here and have lots of indoor-outdoor connections, which is nice. And in terms of this plan, when I mentioned having your master bedroom either with or without the kids' bedrooms, on this one I did try it both ways, and it was working. And again, you could put the master bedroom above these or something too, but in this plan what seemed to be working was you put the master bedroom over on this more northwesterly end of the house. You're going to get all the views to the sunsets and evening sun out this way. It's quieter for sure. You have the kids at one end, you have your room at the other. You're not going to hear them screaming and stuff like that, which is always nice. You're definitely buffered from the living room and stuff here as well, because you have your own ensuite, the walk-in closet. So for noise to make its way down this hallway and then get to your master bedroom, it'll be buffered for the acoustics pretty well. And then I wasn't sure, maybe you'd want a porch, for yourselves off the master bedroom. That one, maybe instead of on that half of the building, maybe it goes under here, something like that. You'd get a little more sun, facing south or southwest. This one will be a little more in the shade, but up here it'd be super quiet. You're not gonna, it's very private really from the rest of the house up here. You've no access from the front porch. You're not going to hear the kids. You won't hear maybe you'll hear the kids in the pool and stuff, but it's sort of a separate zone from that. What else here? So in terms of that master bedroom, like I said, if this isn't working, I did play with having it, you could put it at the end here. You could maybe shift this last bedroom here. But then this becomes such a long corridor. It's pretty long already as it is right now, but that almost becomes a little bit too stretched out, and then it'll feel like walking down, a hallway in a high school or something. It just goes on forever. And I kind of like the separation between the master and the other bedrooms. You have your own sort of quiet space. You can, you have your own zone kind of thing. That said, the drawbacks of that, you're a little bit more removed from the mudroom. Like if you're coming in with dirty work clothes, you strip those off. You're basically walking through the dining room after that. So maybe that's not working. It works well for the kids because they're just around the corner. But maybe you want that mudroom a little closer to the master bedroom. This could probably be a little bit more efficient as well. I don't love this long corridor. I'd like to tighten that up a little bit just to save some space. But then I wanted to give it a little bit of a bump out at the end, so you have a corridor where it's a little bit more confined, but you can duck into the washroom or the closet, but then it kind of opens up into the big master. And again, maybe this at the very end here, maybe this area has a slightly higher ceiling or a vaulted ceiling, so it's a nice sense of arrival after you come down that little corridor. And in terms of the site plan that I went through before, that little diagram, the areas that are really going to take advantage of the views and the light, at least from midday on through the evening, and the sunsets and things like that, are this living space and your master bedroom. Though that's kind of what's getting the best real estate out of the house. And with this layout, the pool sort of makes sense over here, because then it's really never going to be in shadow. It's still connected really well to the living room, the kitchen. I mean, the washroom's not too far away. You don't have to run, if you're soaking wet, you can go around this way. You don't have to walk through the whole house to change, that kind of stuff. And like I said, this is going to be in sun all the time, so it's never going to be in the shadow, even in the morning. I shouldn't say that, maybe early in the morning it might be in a bit of shadow, but you could just shift it out a little bit too. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. But then certainly going to be in sun, in the afternoon and evening and stuff, I'm assuming you probably use it more at those times of days. That covers a lot of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. I'll just move on here a little bit. So then as you zoom out and start to place that floor plan onto the site, this makes a little more sense now, because you can see north is this way, and you can see how things are starting to take advantage of those things that I mentioned with the sight lines and the sun as well. So this is roughly where you picked. That's where that marker was, give or take. So I mean, your driveway's coming in, garage is facing it, so you don't have to, turn 90 degrees or anything to get into the garage. The gas for the propane probably makes sense to be then on this side, roughly, because it's not really going to be in anyone's view. I mean, this bedroom might be able to see it a little bit, but that's not a big deal. It's kind of tucked away, and you could build like a little enclosure or something as well that matches the house and kind of makes that disappear, so it's not an eyesore. That's easy to do. The well, I mean, it could really be anywhere. It kind of makes sense over here, just given that generally speaking, the site kind of slopes this way, more or less. I mean, there's kind of a hill over here, and then a little bit up here as well. But with that said, then this makes sense for the septic system, because if things are naturally flowing that way, you don't have to rely on pumps and things. You can just have a gravity-fed septic system, which is nice, because then there's fewer things to go wrong. One thing we didn't talk about much was if you foresee a shed or a barn or something like that for lawnmowers, tool shed, that kind of stuff. And I just quickly placed it there because, I mean, if you place anything in this area or even out here, that starts to frame this bit of yard. And that's one of the challenges, because your property's so big and it's basically wide open. I mean, you definitely talked about planting some trees and things like that, but you kind of have this house plunked down, and it's you're not really creating much in terms of outdoor rooms. It's just kind of wide open space in every direction, right? So if you take put a little shed here, and maybe you have a shed or something for the pool room or whatever, you start to frame in these little areas, almost like little courtyards. And then this starts to feel perhaps like a little yard. This becomes its own little space. And then instead of one big giant, backyard, you start to have little pockets where you can, maybe have some, patio here with some chairs or something, and then this is where the kids play sports or whatever. Not to say that shed needs to go there, but just thinking about that, even planting trees, you plant a few back here, or wherever you want, really, but then framing out little pockets of space in the outdoors as well. So like I said, in the morning, I mean, you're getting sun generally from these directions. Noon, you're getting it from this way, but it's coming in nice and steep, but that's going to light up, all this space here. These bedrooms get some morning or light all afternoon, I should say. And then later in the day, when the sun's coming in from the west and you're getting these sunsets, I mean, you're definitely still getting tons of light in this living area. Plus then, you're lying in bed at night, reading a book, watching TV, whatever, you get these beautiful sunsets coming in from that west side as well. And it kind of limits, the views and the light and everything from the north. Because like I said, the views this way aren't bad, but they're not as nice as the ones in the back. So that's why I put, it makes sense to have the garage up there. You put the studio up there. Things that don't really require the view or the light, pushing them towards that sort of northeastern side of the site. And then, the spaces that you guys are going to use more, putting them more in the back and taking advantage of that sun and all that space and those views. So then just to quickly end off here, these are some of the questions that came up over the last few days putting this stuff together. So I'll include these in the email as well just to make it a little easier, but I'll just quickly run through these. So for the garage, you mentioned having a side business in there. Just wondering if there's any special requirements for storage or lighting or power or anything like that, because I'm not exactly sure what it was. Again, adding basic storage or a rec room above the garage as a potential future consideration, because you're basically building the garage anyway. It's not much more work to put something above it. Even if it's just a ladder or something for storage. To put a habitable space up there, that's obviously a little more work, but and some stairs and things like that. But that's a consideration. And the entryway. So being able to hide, when people come in to use the studio, is it important to be able to hide the rest of the house with those pocket doors and things like that? Because like I mentioned, you will be able to see down that one corridor and see into the kitchen and living room and stuff. Like it would be not that hard to add another screen or something in there. So you could actually fully close off that front area if you wanted to. So in that studio, is there any specific requirements? I talked about having some extra ceiling height for and maybe some beams or something exposed just for mounting purposes. Having power on the ceiling, that can certainly be helpful with lighting, and you don't have cords everywhere. Natural lighting, I'm assuming you want light sort of from the north where it's diffused, but that's why I like the placement where it is, because you can get it from 3 directions. But maybe that's not what you want, so if that doesn't work, maybe you do want southerly exposure. And I'm also assuming, given that it's a studio, that you want to be able to black out those windows with curtains or something fairly easily. Stairs, I talked about that a little bit. Adding stairs to the basement from the garage. You'd mentioned that. Not that difficult to do. It might, that circulation as we... so if you were to add stairs in here, it might not... it might interfere with that circulation through there. Because you'd probably have to have stairs along that back edge, give or take. But that's a consideration. But instead of stairs in the garage, maybe they move from here. Maybe they go over here or something, right? Where they're a little bit closer, and they're not as out in the open there. I talked about having the stairs, whether you want them sort of open or maybe tucked away behind a door, and that sort of depends on when you plan on finishing the basement, or if you plan on doing that. Kitchen, the way I've drawn it, the kitchen and the dining room kind of is the heart of the house. You're gonna have the kids are gonna be congregating around here and here, and this really, that dining room table, the way that it's drawn now, this kind of, the two of those will kind of become the heart of the house, and people will generally flow around that. But maybe that's not what you want, so that's a consideration. The living room and the kitchen, I talked about that. Maybe they're too connected as they're drawn right now. Maybe we need a little more separation there. Again, looking at the visuals and the acoustics. Living room, including a fireplace, I assume yes, but that's super easy to take out, not a big deal. Master bedroom, do you want some kind of a balcony or porch off of that? I touched on that a little bit. If so, it could be attached to that rear deck, or maybe it's a private one just for you guys. Also in the master bedroom, your ensuite, do you want a tub or just a shower? Or maybe both, either way, that's no problem. Spare bedroom, nothing is shown. It would be super easy to convert that studio or, a space downstairs. So, and given that plan was a little bit over already in size, I think that's probably, it'd be easy enough to add one in the basement when the time comes. Outbuildings and sheds and barns, things like that. If you foresee anything like that, it's a good time to think about it for sure. We talked about, if you want a shed or something, if you're going to be bringing power in from the road, probably along that driveway anyway, it would be easy. Maybe you're not going to build a shed or something this year, but maybe 5 years down the line, you could just bury the line and have it ready to go in the right spot, so that you don't have to worry about it again. But just something to consider. And lastly, propane for heat. You talked about that, but then also I assume then for cooking on stovetop, you could do a built-in barbecue with a dedicated line as well that runs right to it, so you don't have to fumble around with propane tanks and stuff like that. And then I'm assuming then if there is a fireplace in that living room, that that we would probably do gas for that as opposed to a wood stove or something like that. So like I said, this is a little bit over. It's a couple hundred square feet over. It won't be that hard to tighten it up. I think this master bedroom area can be tightened up a little bit. I can probably get rid of some of this hallway one way or another by playing with these closets and bedrooms a little bit. And then one way, I definitely like how it's working now, but if it's looking too big, we can play with some stuff in the middle here. So actually I didn't mention this. So this right now is kind of a generic little space, and you sent that photo where you wanted to have kind of an electronic station. You have your printers and phone chargers and modem and router and all that kind of stuff, but then it kind of becomes a dumping ground, right, for mail and keys and notes and whatever, homework, all that kind of stuff. And so that's basically what I've drawn here. Is I've given you that same kind of area, but maybe you don't want that, because then once it's there, it's going to get used for that kind of purpose. So maybe that comes out, but it works well because you come in, take off your boots and coats, you walk by here, you drop your keys, the mail, that kind of stuff. So it is a pretty functional space, and clearly you guys are using it for something like that. But like I said, if this is feeling too big, we could take this out. This dining room table could spin 90 degrees and be a little bit more lengthwise. And then we could shave a little bit of space out of this hallway. We could thin up that mudroom a little bit so it's not quite as deep. And then this whole middle space could kind of shrink in a little bit. And we could shave off, 4 or 5 feet or something like that, which would, over the span of, 60 feet or something like that. Not quite 60. No, I take that back. Anyway, we could shave off a good, 100 square feet or something like that off this middle section, just by rotating this dining room table to be more in line with that island and sort of squeezing this kitchen and dining area, bringing the sides in a little bit. But anyway, I just wanted to pass that along. This one's fairly well developed, actually, but if it's not working, I have a few other ones in the works. They definitely weren't as developed as this. This was the one I was gravitating towards a little bit more. The one big downside, I guess, that you'd mentioned was having a walkout basement of some sort. But then I was also juggling that with, trying to limit the number of stairs as well, so that we can sort of combine the two. Your master bedroom could be up a few stairs. It would be easy enough to go up 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 stairs here, and then that means the space underneath in the basement is going to be that much higher, and you could have a walkout underneath there. That also means you could have a porch or something up on this side, which is raised up a little bit too, which is nice. And that kind of goes either way, because this master bedroom, all this stuff could go over this area here. So, maybe you go up 6 steps to get to your level, the kids go down 6 steps to get to their level. So then there's no basement necessarily underneath the bedrooms, because it's kind of a split level for half. So assume this area here is 2 stories, and you go up 6 and down 6, depending which way you're going, and then this is all sort of 1 story. The kids' bedrooms, they can still have giant windows looking outside, but then, you still get, you're up in the air a little higher, so then you can have even bigger windows and things like that. So, but anyway, there's a million ways we can still play with this, but I wanted to at least get it in your hands so you can have something to look at, and we'll talk shortly about what you like, what you don't like, what's working, what's not working, some answers to those questions at the end as well. And we'll go from there. So we'll talk soon, and we'll revise this a little bit and get it a little bit closer to what works. All right, we'll talk soon. Thanks.